Last year, you made a powerful statement saying the reason people are watching women's basketball is not just because of one player, but because of you too. A year later, do you feel like you're
Next question.
Next question. 2 words. That's all Angel Reese said. And yet, in those 2 words, she exposed the uncomfortable tension running beneath the surface of the WNBA. No explanation, no follow-up, just silence, and a stare that told you everything you needed to know. Because this isn't just a basketball story anymore. It's a power shift, a cultural earthquake, one that started the moment Caitlin Clark stepped into the league and refused to play by anyone else's rules. Millions of fans poured in, jerseys flew off shelves, TV ratings shattered records. The WNBA finally had the spotlight it had been chasing for decades, but instead of embracing it, many inside the league pushed back.
But the WNBA last year, bless their hearts, finally got a star. And they didn't know that. They couldn't figure it out. Well, we don't want to put too much Caitlin Clark on. Nope, every game. More Caitlin Clark all the time, always. Caitlin Clark is easily the most influential athlete in a team sport since Michael Jordan.
They downplayed Caitlin's rise, mocked her fans, and let players take cheap shots on the court while refs swallowed their whistles. Why? Because the attention wasn't going to them, it was going to her. But what they didn't expect was what happened next. This is the story of how Caitlin Clark went from outsider to unstoppable, and how the league that tried to ignore her is now realizing they can't survive without her. By the end of this video, you'll see why everything has changed, and why no one in the WNBA can afford to pretend otherwise anymore. Let's get into it. Caitlin Clark didn't just enter the WNBA, she detonated into it. Before she ever played a professional game, the numbers were already screaming.
Now, if we say her stats are today, what?
20 points, 8.4 assists, 6 rebounds.
That's crazy.
But 5
That's crazy.
She had shattered the NCAA all-time scoring record, men's and women's. She had dragged Iowa to back-to-back national title games. And every arena she walked into turned into a sold-out spectacle. When the Indiana Fever drafted her with the #1 pick, there wasn't a single person in the building surprised. It wasn't just a draft, it was a coronation. From the moment she stepped on the court, everything changed. Fever games became must-watch TV. Fans lined up for hours. Scalpers were charging playoff prices for regular season tickets.
The media, I felt like, mishandled so many things with the WNBA last season, and specifically with Caitlin Clark and her fan base. And that's one thing when you start thinking about how many people stopped watching when Caitlin Clark got injured. A lot of people stopped watching because they are boycotting the WNBA. They don't want to give viewership to any other teams or any other players, whether they like other players on the team or not, because of how the media and the league itself has handled Caitlin Clark.
TV executives were scrambling to air her games nationally. Her presence didn't just lift the Fever, it lifted the entire league. The WNBA had spent years begging for this kind of attention, but when it arrived in the form of a white girl from Iowa, things got complicated, because as the crowds grew louder and the headlines kept stacking up, so did the resentment. The WNBA finally had its moment, but for some, it wasn't the right moment, because it wasn't happening the way they thought it would, and that's when the pushback began. For years, WNBA veterans believed they'd be the ones to build the league into something bigger, that if they kept showing up, kept grinding, and kept winning, the fans would eventually follow.
Yup, I'm gonna say it. Caitlin Clark is the best basketball player in the world. She's the best basketball player that I have ever seen. She is the difference maker. She is the needle mover. She is the face of basketball right now.
The dream was about collective growth, a movement of many, but then came Caitlin Clark, and she rewrote that entire script in real time. Before she even touched a WNBA court, it was clear she wasn't coming in like everyone else. She wasn't just a draft pick, she was a phenomenon. Her face was everywhere. Sponsors were lining up, headlines were non-stop, and arenas were selling out based on her name alone. It was the kind of attention most players had never seen, and it wasn't shared. That's when the denial set in, not just doubt, but resistance. Teammates, media voices, even league insiders tried to dilute the hype.
Number one of the greatest single half performances I've ever seen in basketball. I've fully watched all of Magic, all of Bird, all of Chuck, all of Jordan, Ewing, Olajuwon, all of them. It was one of the best halves. It was in the top 5 best offensive halves of basketball I've ever seen.
She hasn't played a single pro game. There are other talented rookies too. She's just a product of the media machine. Anything to make it feel less threatening, but the truth kept screaming louder. Caitlyn wasn't just a good player, she was a moment. And when her first game drew 2.1 million viewers, the most in 2 decades, the walls of denial started to crumble. The spotlight wasn't going to fade, and for those still hoping she'd flop, what came next wasn't comforting. It was anger, and it showed up where it hurt most. When denial stopped working, frustration boiled over.
And Indiana has done it. Their first ever Commissioner's Cup championship, knocking off the Minnesota Lynx. This is Howard setting up McDonald, knocking down the tray. Finds it cutting McDonald, easy deuce.
And Caitlin Clark became a moving target. Suddenly, every game had a different kind of edge. She wasn't just being defended, she was being hit. Hard, off-ball elbows, blindsided screens, and fouls that magically disappeared when the whistle should have blown. And strangely, the refs stayed silent through most of it, as if the league had decided, let her feel it, let her earn it. It became a pattern. Rough play, no calls, and silence from the league office. And it wasn't random. It felt personal, like a message. You might be the star, but you're not going to have it easy.
Second-year players clearing out that side of the floor, shooting on Stewie, and then watch the reaction with one another. Stewie's laughing. Caitlyn knows it's ridiculous. Just out there having a good time with.
But Caitlyn didn't complain. She didn't lash out. She kept showing up, bruised, yes, but more locked in than ever. She played through every hit, every cheap shot, and kept delivering. And when the Olympic break came around, while others rested, Caitlyn doubled down. She came back playing the best basketball of her career, MVP-level numbers, record-breaking assists, leading her team to real wins. All while the same players who once brushed her off now had to defend her on national TV. The anger campaign didn't slow her down, it exposed her resilience. And once they realized she wasn't going to break physically or mentally, the criticism took a different route.
3 threes in 38 seconds in the first half. Caitlin Clark hit 3 logo bombs, by the way. 3 logo bombs in 38 seconds. This was the Caitlin Clark we all said, oh, she's different. She's sent from outer space. The Caitlin Clark that we saw today was the Caitlin Clark that we were accustomed to seeing. Oh, it feels good, folks.
They started attacking her success from another angle, one that had nothing to do with her game. When rough play couldn't stop her and the numbers kept climbing, critics pivoted. If they couldn't discredit Caitlin Clark on the court, they'd try to do it off it. That's when the narrative shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just about basketball. It became about race, media bias, and privilege. Analysts started asking why Caitlin got so much attention, why the media covered her so heavily, why little girls showed up in Clark jerseys but not others. Some even suggested she was benefiting from being a white girl from the Midwest, as if that alone explained record-breaking viewership and packed arenas. They knew better than to call her out directly. They ignored the stats, leading the league in assists as a rookie, averaging nearly 20 points a game, and breaking records left and right. None of that seemed to matter, because the criticism wasn't really about basketball anymore. It was about identity, about control, about players and voices who felt overlooked watching someone else steal the moment they thought would be theirs. It was a form of bargaining, a way to make peace with the fact that the spotlight had shifted. Instead of admitting she'd earned it, some tried to rewrite the story. But while they were negotiating their own pride, something else was happening in the background, something that made the truth even harder to deny. Veterans weren't just accepting Caitlyn's success, they were lining up to be a part of it. Not long ago, Indiana was seen as one of the least desirable teams in the WNBA. Media voices like Cheryl Swoops said it openly. Diana Taurasi even brought up old rumors about how players avoided the fever. But suddenly, that narrative collapsed. Fast, veteran after veteran started signing with Indiana. These weren't fringe players or roster fillers. These were champions, names with rings, experience, and options. DeWanna Bonner, Natasha Howard, Sydney Colson, players who could have gone anywhere, chose there. Why? One reason, Caitlin Clark. They weren't coming for the city or even the coaching. They were coming for the energy, for the crowds, for the momentum Caitlin brought with her. Being around her wasn't just exciting, it was career changing. It meant exposure, relevancy, and a chance to be part of something bigger. The same league that once questioned her now found itself reshaping around her. Indiana became the destination. A team once overlooked now had the brightest spotlight in the league, and the veterans wanted in. That's when everything started snowballing. Arenas upgraded, games were moved, and it wasn't for playoff stakes or parity. It was for Caitlin. Wherever she went, demand followed. Teams that used to play in half-empty gyms were suddenly scrambling to find more seats because Caitlin Clark was coming to town. Once the league realized the gravity of Caitlin Clark's pull, the business side snapped into action. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was economics. First, teams started moving games to bigger venues, NBA arenas, full-size stadiums, not for the playoffs, not for rivalries, just because Caitlin was coming. If she was on the schedule, you needed more seats, plain and simple. Then came the TV deals. Out of the Indiana Fever's 44 regular season games, 41 were scheduled to be nationally televised. That's not just visibility, that's saturation. The networks weren't hedging bets. They were going all in, betting on one player to carry the league's entertainment value night after night. And if there was any doubt left about her drawing power, the preseason ended it. One exhibition game, no standings, no playoff implications, sold out a 15,000 seat arena. The average ticket price? $650. Do the math, and you're looking at nearly $10 million in revenue for a preseason game. Let that sink in. This wasn't hype. This wasn't marketing spin. This was real demand, real dollars, real momentum, and the rest of the league couldn't ignore it anymore. Teams saw their own attendance spike only when Caitlin was in town. Sponsors shifted budgets toward her games. Merch sales exploded when her name was involved. It wasn't just a breakout moment. It was a takeover. And with every packed arena and sold out game, something started to shift inside the league, not just in behavior, but in mindset. At a certain point, the resistance faded because it had to. You could see it in post-game interviews. You could hear it in the tone of commentators. Players who once seemed skeptical were now giving props, not reluctantly, but genuinely. Not just saying Caitlin was good, but admitting she was changing the game. And that shift hit its peak during her homecoming game in Iowa. It was a preseason exhibition, no real stakes, but over 15,000 fans packed the arena. Millions more tuned in from home. In fact, 1.3 million people watched that game on TV, more than the average WNBA finals game, more than NBA preseason games in the last 7 years, and more than any MLB spring training game ever. But it wasn't just the numbers, it was what Caitlin did in that moment. With all eyes on her, she stepped up to the very same spot on the court where she had broken the NCAA scoring record. And from that exact spot, she pulled up and drained a deep three, a perfect full circle moment. Not accidental, but intentional. It was her way of saying, yeah, I know you're watching, and I know why you came. The crowd lost it, the internet exploded, and even her opponents, the Brazilian national team, rushed to her after the game like fans, taking selfies, smiling, treating her like a superstar. Because at that point, she wasn't just a rookie, she was the story, and it became impossible to deny that the Caitlin Clark effect was no longer rising. It had arrived. While most players were easing into the off-season, Caitlin Clark was doing the opposite. She was flying across the country for high-profile events, speaking at NFL owners' meetings, attending the Masters, and still showing up at the gym by 8 a.m. the next day. No cameras, no excuses, just work. This wasn't about chasing attention, it was about staying ahead of it. Every step she took showed one thing clearly. She wasn't just built for the moment, she was built to own it. Her preparation, discipline, and mindset drew constant comparisons to Kobe Bryant. And honestly, it wasn't a reach, because it wasn't just her shooting or passing that separated her. It was her attitude, her willingness to meet pressure head on, her ability to turn hate into focus, her refusal to crack even when the league tried to bury her with physical play, media noise, and politics. And now, she's bigger, faster, and stronger. Her body has adjusted to the WNBA grind. Her decision-making has sharpened. Her court vision is elite, and her confidence, it's untouchable. Some critics have gone quiet. Others are suddenly singing her praises. Not because they've changed their minds, but because they see which way the wind is blowing. And like always, Caitlin didn't ask for validation. She earned it. At this point, she's not adapting to the league. She's starting to take it over. Caitlin Clark isn't waiting to build a legacy, and she's she's already living it. Most rookies need time to adjust, not her. From day one, she stepped in like a veteran, led her team, and changed the league's energy. She didn't just meet expectations, she crushed them. She's not just putting up stats, she's making history with every pass, every deep three, every packed arena. And what makes it even crazier, she's doing it all while still learning the league. She understands the moment better than anyone. She knows when the cameras are on, and more importantly, she delivers when it matters. What we're seeing isn't normal, it's special, and it's just the beginning. The WNBA hasn't just found a star, it's found a turning point, and Caitlin Clark is the name etched at the center of it. The WNBA wanted a breakout star. And then Caitlin Clark arrived. She brought the fans, the headlines, the money, but instead of being embraced, she was challenged at every turn, ignored by refs, targeted on the court, questioned off it. Still, she rose. She didn't just survive the pressure, she owned it. She turned criticism into fuel and built something the league couldn't ignore. Now, the WNBA runs on Caitlin Clark. She's not just a rookie, she's the reason games are sold out, the reason TV ratings are breaking records, the reason people who never watched before suddenly care. This isn't hype anymore, it's reality, and it's just getting started. Drop a trophy in the comments if you're watching the Caitlin Clark era unfold. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next chapter might be even bigger.